A single photo of an engagement ring on another woman's hand confirmed my husband's betrayal. He thought he was starting a new life. I was about to invite his fiancée to our public vow renewal. The world didn't end with a bang or a whimper. It ended with a quiet ping from my laptop. I was sitting at our marble kitchen island sipping a lukewarm coffee I'd forgotten about, trying to untangle a particularly nasty bit of code for my company's latest app update. Mark and I had our photos automatically synced to a shared cloud drive, a digital scrapbook of our perfect life. It was usually filled with vacation pictures, blurry shots of our golden retriever, and fancy restaurant dinners. But the ping that announced a new upload revealed a photo that wasn't of us. It was a close-up of a woman's hand, delicate and manicured, with a diamond ring on her fourth finger. It was a beautiful ring, a princess-cut solitaire that must have cost a fortune. My fortune, to be precise. The caption beneath it, uploaded from Mark's phone just minutes ago, was simple. 4 devastating words. She said yes. My breath caught in my chest. For a full minute, I just stared. My mind refused to process it. This had to be a mistake, a prank, maybe a picture of his cousin's engagement he was sharing with me. But I knew his cousins. I didn't know this hand. I didn't know this elegant, oval-shaped nail bed or the faint constellation of freckles on the knuckles. My own hands, resting on the laptop, were calloused from late nights on the keyboard and years of hauling server equipment when my company was just a startup in my garage. I zoomed in. The reflection in the diamond was distorted, but I could make out the shape of my husband's head, bent down as he took the picture. My husband, proposing to another woman. With a ring bought with money from the company I built from nothing. The coffee cup slipped from my numb fingers and shattered on the floor, but I didn't even flinch. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Mark was my rock. When I met him, I was 22, fueled by caffeine and ambition, coding 18 hours a day to get my software company off the ground. He was a junior marketing manager at a firm I was trying to pitch to. He saw something in my frantic energy that others dismissed as naive. He'd bring me food when I'd forget to eat, listen to my rambling tech speak with a patient smile, and celebrate every tiny victory as if we'd just won the lottery. He was my biggest cheerleader. "You're going to build an empire, babe," he'd say, kissing my forehead while I stared, bleary-eyed at a screen of code. "And I'll be right here holding the ladder." And I did. I built an empire. By the time I was 25, my company was valued at 8 figures. We moved from my tiny apartment into a sprawling modern house with floor-to-ceiling windows. I bought him the sports car he'd always dreamed of. Life was good. It was perfect. When he proposed a year later, on a beach in Bali under a sky full of stars, it felt like the final, perfect piece of my life clicking into place. But I'm a pragmatist. I build systems designed to withstand failure. I plan for every contingency. My business was my baby, my life's work, built on my sweat and my risk. So I asked for a prenup. I remember the conversation perfectly. We were in our lawyer's sleek, impersonal office. I was nervous, worried he'd think I didn't trust him. "Mark," I started, "it's not about us. It's about the company. It's to protect what I've built for both of our futures." He just laughed, that easy, charming laugh that always put me at ease. He took my hand across the mahogany desk. "Babe, of course. I get it. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. But you're the genius here. If a piece of paper makes you feel secure, I'll sign anything you put in front of me." He was so confident, so dismissive. The lawyer slid the thick document towards him. Mark picked up the pen, flipped to the last page, and signed his name with a flourish, without reading a single word. He never even glanced at the pages. He had no idea what he was signing. He had no idea about the clause. My lawyer, a shrewd woman who had seen it all, insisted we include Clause 26. Clause 26 was my masterpiece of self-preservation. It was an infidelity clause, but a particularly brutal one. It stated that in the event of proven marital infidelity on his part, the entire prenup would default to a state of absolute separation of assets. He would leave the marriage with only what he had brought into it: his 10-year-old Honda Civic, his outstanding student loan debt, and the clothes on his back. Everything else, the house, the cars, the investment accounts, the shared savings, every single stock option was mine. It was an ironclad, non-negotiable, financial annihilation. And as I stared at the picture of that diamond ring on another woman's finger, the number 26 echoed in my head. I was 26 years old, and my husband had just forgotten about Clause 26. The cold shock began to recede, replaced by a strange, chilling calm. The shattered coffee cup on the floor seemed like a relic from another person's life. I wasn't that person anymore. The heartbroken wife was gone. In her place was a CEO, a strategist, a woman who had just identified a catastrophic system failure and was now preparing to execute a recovery protocol. I calmly saved a screenshot of the photo, backed it up to 3 separate secure servers, and closed the laptop. I walked over to the mess on the floor, carefully picking up the larger shards of ceramic and dropping them in the bin. I wiped up the spilled coffee until the marble shone again, as if nothing had ever happened. He would be home from his late meeting at the office in about an hour. He would walk in, expecting his loving wife, dinner on the table, our dog wagging his tail. He would have no idea that I knew. He would have no idea that he had just signed his own eviction notice. I heard his car pull into the driveway right on time. The front door clicked open. "Hey, babe, I'm home!" he called out, his voice full of a cheerfulness that now sounded utterly grotesque. I smoothed down my shirt, took a deep, steadying breath, and composed my face into a perfect mask of welcoming affection. I walked out of the kitchen and into the foyer to greet him. He was holding a bouquet of my favorite flowers, stargazer lilies. The hypocrisy was so staggering it was almost beautiful. He leaned in to kiss me, and I let him, my lips as cold as the fury pumping through my veins. "I'm sorry I'm so late," he said, handing me the flowers. "The Peterson account is just being a nightmare." I gave him my brightest smile, the one I reserved for difficult clients just before closing a deal. "Don't worry about it for a second," I said, my voice sweet as poison. "I was actually just thinking, we haven't had a proper celebration in ages. I'm making your favorite tonight, and I bought that expensive bottle of wine you love." He looked surprised, a flicker of guilt in his eyes that he quickly hid. "Oh? A celebration? What's the occasion?" I looked him dead in the eye, my smile never wavering, and I delivered the first line of my new script. "I just have a feeling that our lives are about to change in a very big way, and I want to get your parents and my parents together for dinner this weekend. I have some very, very important news I want to share with the whole family." A flicker of panic, so fast I would have missed it if I wasn't looking for it, crossed his face before being replaced by a forced smile. "Our parents? Together? That's great, honey. Really great. What's the news?" He was fishing, desperate for a clue. Was I pregnant? Was I taking the company public? Each possibility was a different kind of cage for him, and I could see him running the calculations behind his eyes. I just smiled mysteriously, taking the lilies from him and walking to the kitchen to find a vase. "If I told you now, it wouldn't be a surprise, would it?" I called over my shoulder. "Just tell your parents to be here Saturday at 7 and to dress up." The next 3 days were a master class in psychological torture. I was the perfect wife. I was affectionate, attentive, and cheerful. I made his favorite breakfasts, left little loving notes in his briefcase, and talked excitedly about our future. On the surface, I was a woman floating on a cloud of good news. Underneath, I was a predator, watching its prey, and Mark was unraveling. He was jumpy and distracted. He'd check his phone constantly, his thumb hovering over the screen before quickly putting it away whenever I entered the room. He'd ask leading questions, trying to pry the secret out of me. "Are you feeling okay? You're not, tired or anything?" he asked one morning, his eyes darting to my stomach. "I feel fantastic," I replied, sipping my tea. "Never better." His relief was palpable, quickly followed by renewed confusion. He He couldn't figure out the game, and it was driving him insane. He was sleeping in a minefield, and I was the one who knew the location of every single mine. Saturday arrived. I spent the day preparing. I hired a private chef to cook an elaborate 7-course meal. I chose the finest china, the crystal glasses that chimed with the lightest touch, and decorated the dining room with candles and more stargazer lilies, their cloying scent filling the air. Our house looked like a magazine spread, a testament to the life I had built and the life he was about to forfeit. I wore a crimson dress, a color of celebration and of war. When I came downstairs, Mark was already in his suit, pacing nervously and straightening his tie. He stopped when he saw me. "Wow," he breathed. "You look incredible." For a moment, his mask slipped. I saw a flash of genuine adoration, a ghost of the man I had married. It was a painful reminder, but it didn't soften me. It hardened me. That man was gone, replaced by a liar who thought I was a fool. Our parents arrived within minutes of each other. My mom and dad, quiet and proud, always a little intimidated by the scale of my success. And his parents, Alan and Carol, who treated me less like a daughter-in-law and more like a winning lottery ticket. They gushed over the house, the flowers, my dress. "Oh, honey, you look like a movie star," Carol chirped, squeezing my arm. "Mark is just the luckiest man in the world." I smiled back at her, catching Mark's eye over her shoulder. "Yes," I said, my voice dripping with sincerity. "He is." We sat down to dinner, and the performance began. We drank champagne. We laughed at old family stories. Alan, Mark's father, proposed a toast. "To our children," he said, beaming, "to their incredible success and the beautiful life they've built together. We couldn't be prouder." Glasses clinked. Mark's smile was a tight, painful grimace. He looked like he was going to be sick. The chef brought out course after course. The conversation flowed around Mark, who mostly sat in silence, pushing exquisite food around his plate. Every time I laughed, every time I shared a happy anecdote, I could feel him flinch. He was waiting for the axe to fall. Finally, after dessert was served, I cleared my throat. The table fell silent. All eyes turned to me. This was it. Mark gripped his wine glass so tightly his knuckles were white. His leg was bouncing under the table, a frantic, jittery rhythm. I let the silence hang in the air for a dramatic beat, savoring his terror. "As you all know," I began, my voice clear and steady, "I asked you here tonight because I have something very special to announce." I reached across the table and placed my hand over Mark's. His was ice cold and slick with sweat. He flinched at my touch. I looked around at their expectant faces. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a napkin already. Carol was practically vibrating with excitement. "Mark and I have been married for 5 wonderful years," I continued, turning to look at my husband, my expression one of pure, unadulterated love. "And in that time, we've built a life I could have only dreamed of. He's been my rock, my biggest supporter, my everything." I squeezed his hand. He looked like a cornered animal. "I've been thinking a lot lately about how to celebrate the journey we've been on and how to kick off the next chapter of our lives together." I paused again, letting the anticipation build until it was almost unbearable. Mark's breathing was shallow. He was preparing for the worst. I smiled my widest, most brilliant smile, a smile that didn't reach my cold, dead eyes. "So, I've decided to surprise him. I've booked the most beautiful venue in Napa Valley for this fall, and I've hired the best wedding planner in the country. We're going to renew our vows. In front of all our friends and family, we're going to declare our love for each other all over again." The room erupted. My mom burst into happy tears. Carol shrieked with delight and rushed over to hug me. "Oh, honey, that's the most romantic thing I've ever heard," she cried. Mark just sat there, frozen, his face a pale, ghostly mask of shock. He was trapped. How could he refuse? How could he tell our overjoyed parents that he didn't want to publicly renew his vows to his doting, successful wife? It was the perfect checkmate. And then, as Carol released me and the happy chatter continued, I leaned in close to Mark's ear, my lips almost brushing his skin. Under the cover of the celebration, I whispered 7 words, a venomous little promise that made the blood drain completely from his face. "And I already know her name, Mark." He went absolutely rigid. It was as if I'd flicked a switch and shut down every non-essential function in his body. His fake smile vanished, his eyes widened, and the color drained from his face until he was the same shade as our expensive white tablecloth. For a split second, I thought he might actually faint right there at the dinner table. Our parents, caught up in their own excitement about a party, didn't notice a thing. Carol was already discussing color schemes with my mother, and my father was clapping Mark on the back, congratulating him on having such a thoughtful wife. "You've got to keep her there, son," he boomed, oblivious to the fact that his son looked like he'd just seen a ghost. Mark couldn't speak. He just stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, a million questions and accusations swirling in his terrified eyes. I simply smiled back, a serene Mona Lisa smile, and took a delicate sip of my dessert wine. The game had officially begun. The rest of the evening was a blur of feigned joy. I floated through the conversations, discussing guest lists and potential dress designers, all while Mark sat beside me like a stone statue. He managed a few monosyllabic responses when spoken to directly, but the charming life-of-the-party husband everyone knew was gone, replaced by a shell-shocked automaton. The moment our parents finally left, their cars pulling out of the driveway filled with happy chatter about the upcoming wedding, the facade shattered. He turned on me, his voice a harsh, panicked whisper. "What was that? What the hell was that, Amelia?" "That," I said calmly, beginning to clear the dessert plates, "was an announcement. Didn't you hear? We're renewing our vows. It's going to be the event of the season." I carried the plates into the kitchen, and he followed me like a dog on a leash. "Don't play dumb with me," he hissed, grabbing my arm. His touch was rough, desperate. I slowly turned to face him, my eyes hard. "Let go of me, Mark." My voice was quiet, but it had the sharp, cold edge of a surgeon's scalpel. He dropped his hand as if he'd been burned. "What did you mean?" he asked, his voice cracking. "What you whispered to me." "I know her name." "What does that mean?" I leaned back against the marble counter, crossing my arms. I let him stew in the silence for a long moment, watching the panic flicker across his face. "Her name is Chloe," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "She's 24. She's a brand strategist at a boutique marketing firm downtown. You met her 6 months ago at a conference in San Diego. You told me you were going for a team-building retreat. You've been paying for her apartment in the new high-rise on Grand Street for the last 4 months. The lease is in your name. The rent is auto-debited from our joint savings account, the one I fund. You told her you were unhappily married, that we were basically separated, and that you were just waiting for the right time to leave me." I paused, letting the information sink in. Each fact was a hammer blow, and I could see him physically recoiling. "And the ring," I added, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "The princess-cut solitaire. It cost $62,000. You bought it 2 days ago from DeVere Jewelers on Rodeo Drive. You paid for it with the company Platinum card. My company." He stared at me, utterly defeated. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a pathetic, pleading look. "Amelia, I can explain." "Can you?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Can you really? Can you explain the photo you uploaded to our shared cloud, Mark? The one captioned, 'She said yes'? Did you think I wouldn't see it? Did you think I was that stupid? Or were you just so high on your little romance that you got sloppy?" He stumbled backward, collapsing onto one of the kitchen stools. He put his head in his hands. "It wasn't supposed to. I never meant for you to find out like this," he mumbled into his palms. "I love you. I do. This thing with Chloe, it was a mistake. It just got out of control." "A mistake?" I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that echoed in the cavernous kitchen. A mistake is spilling coffee. A mistake is forgetting to pick up dry cleaning. Systematically draining our finances to fund a secret life with your mistress for half a year isn't a mistake, Mark. It's a strategy. It's a choice. And you chose her. I pushed myself off the counter and walked towards the living room. So here's what's going to happen now, I said, my back to him. You are going to play the part of the devoted, adoring husband who is ecstatically happy about renewing his vows with his wife. You will attend wedding planning meetings. You will help me choose caterers and floral arrangements. You will smile for photos and tell all our friends and family how lucky you are. You will do this because if you don't, if you give me even one reason to suspect you are not cooperating, I will not only leave you, but I will utterly destroy you. He looked up, his face pale with confusion. But you're going to leave me anyway, aren't you? Oh, absolutely, I confirmed, turning around to face him with a chillingly bright smile. But there's leaving, and then there's leaving. Right now, we have a little agreement, a contract. You know, like the one you signed before we got married? The one you didn't bother to read. I let that sink in. You play along with this little wedding fantasy of mine until I say we're done. And in return for your performance, I might consider being generous in our divorce settlement. I might let you walk away with a little dignity, a small severance package for your years of service, if you will. But if you cross me, if you try to warn Chloe, if you do anything to disrupt my plans, I will enact Clause 26. And I promise you, Mark, you will leave my life with less than nothing. You'll be begging her to let you sleep on her couch. Is that clear? He nodded numbly, his eyes wide with a dawning horror as the full weight of his mistake, the one he made 5 years ago in a lawyer's office, finally crashed down on him. For the next 2 weeks, he was a perfect puppet. He sat beside me during meetings with our ridiculously expensive wedding planner, nodding enthusiastically about ice sculptures and string quartets. He gave his opinion on invitation fonts and cake flavors. To the outside world, we were the perfect couple, blissfully recommitting to each other. In private, he was a wreck, walking on eggshells, terrified of making a wrong move. I, on the other hand, was thriving. I was running my company, planning a 6-figure fake wedding, and methodically gathering every last piece of evidence I needed. I had my lawyer hire a private investigator who confirmed everything I already knew and uncovered even more. The lavish gifts, the weekend trips, the romantic dinners, all paid for with my money. The final report was a thick, detailed dossier of his betrayal. The stage was almost set. All I needed was one final spectacular piece to bring the whole production to its glorious, crashing finale, and I knew exactly how I was going to get it. I walked into the living room where Mark was pretending to read a book. "Honey," I said, my voice dripping with fake sweetness, "I have the most wonderful idea. Our vow renewal is all about us, about our love story. I think it would be so romantic to include the person who is making our future so bright. I want to invite her." Mark's head shot up, his face a mask of pure terror. "Invite who?" he stammered. I smiled. "Chloe, of course. I'm going to invite your fiancé to our wedding." Mark looked as though I had just suggested we invite a live shark to swim in our pool. "You can't be serious," he whispered, the book falling from his lap onto the floor with a soft thud. "Amelia, no, you can't. That's insane." I walked over and sat on the ottoman in front of him, leaning in conspiratorially, my voice dropping to a gentle, persuasive tone. "Why is it insane, honey? You said this thing with her was a mistake, that it got out of control. What better way to show her and me that it's really over? You'll be standing at the altar renewing your vows to me, your wife. She'll be there, in the audience, watching. It's the perfect, definitive ending to your mistake. Clean, final. No messy conversations, no lingering doubts. She sees you choose me, and she quietly disappears. Isn't that what you want?" He was trapped. Every word I said was a logical, twisted barb. If he argued against it, he was admitting he still had feelings for Chloe. that he wanted to protect her, which would violate the terms of our fragile, terrifying truce. If he agreed, he was consenting to participate in a level of psychological warfare that was almost unthinkable. I could see the gears turning in his head, the panic warring with self-preservation. What would you even say to her? He stammered, looking for any way out. Oh, I'll handle that, I said breezily, standing up. I'll be very discreet. Don't you worry about a thing. Finding Chloe was insultingly easy. Mark was not a criminal mastermind. He was a careless, arrogant man. A quick search of his credit card statements gave me the name of the florist he used to send her bouquets every Monday. I called the shop, pretending to be his executive assistant. Hi there. I'm calling on behalf of Mark Peterson. He wanted to add a little note to this week's delivery for Chloe, but he's in back-to-back meetings and asked me to handle it. Could you just confirm the delivery address for me so I can make sure my note is appropriate? The cheerful girl on the other end read out the address to the high-rise on Grand Street without a second thought. I had my PI confirm it was her, but I already knew. The next day, I drove to her building. It was one of those new, sterile glass towers for young professionals, with a soulless lobby and a bored-looking concierge. I didn't go in. I just sat in my car across the street for an hour, waiting. Right on schedule, she walked out. She was exactly what I expected. Young, pretty in a generic sort of way, dressed in trendy clothes that probably cost a fortune my fortune. She had an air of unearned confidence about her. She was the kind of woman who had never had to build anything, only decorate the things that were given to her. I watched her get into a rideshare, a sickening knot of anger and something else, pity maybe, twisting in my gut. This girl had no idea she was a pawn in a game she couldn't possibly win. The invitation was a work of art. I had it specially printed on the same thick, creamy cardstock as our actual vow renewal invitations. It read, Amelia and Mark Peterson cordially invite you to be their special guest as they celebrate 5 years of love and recommit their lives to one another. I didn't address it to Chloe. I addressed it to Mark's fiancée. I put it in a shimmering envelope, drove to her apartment building, and charmed the concierge into letting me leave it for her at the front desk. It's a surprise, I'd said with a wink. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the mouse to take the bait. It took less than 24 hours. The next evening, Mark and I were having another of our silent, tense dinners when his phone, which he'd placed face down on the table, began to vibrate violently. It buzzed and skittered across the polished wood like a cornered insect. He stared at it, his face ashen. He knew who it was. "Aren't you gonna get that?" I asked, taking a calm bite of my salmon. He snatched the phone and stood up, walking quickly into the hallway. "I have to take this," he muttered. I didn't need to follow him. I could hear his panicked, hushed tones from the dining room. "What? No, it's not what you think." "Chloe, just calm down. Listen to me, you can't—" I smiled to myself and continued eating. He came back 10 minutes later, looking like he'd aged a decade. He sank into his chair, the phone clutched in his hand. "She's coming," he said, his voice a dead, hollow thing. She thinks you found out about us, and this is your weird, passive-aggressive way of breaking up with me and giving her your blessing. She thinks you're inviting her to watch you set me free." I almost choked on my wine. The sheer narcissistic audacity was breathtaking. Of course she thought that. In her world, she was the main character, the plucky heroine who had won the heart of the trapped, married man. I was just the cold, older wife, an obstacle to be gracefully overcome. She thought she was coming to her coronation. "Well then," I said, dabbing my lips with a napkin, "we certainly can't disappoint her, can we? Make sure she picks a nice dress." The day of the vow renewal was perfect. A flawless, sunny Napa day. The venue was stunning, a sprawling vineyard estate with views that stretched for miles. I had spared no expense. There were flowers everywhere, a string quartet playing softly, and waiters circling with trays of champagne and ludicrously expensive hors d'oeuvres. Our friends and family mingled on the lawn, laughing and congratulating us. Mark stood beside me at the entrance, greeting guests, his smile so tight it looked like it was carved from wood. He looked handsome in his custom-tailored suit, but his eyes were like a terrified animal's, constantly scanning the crowd. Then I saw her. Chloe arrived alone, fashionably late. She wore a slinky, champagne-colored dress that was beautiful, but entirely inappropriate for the occasion. It was a dress designed to be noticed. She glided through the crowd, her head held high, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She thought this was her victory party. I watched Mark's eyes lock onto hers across the lawn. I saw the silent, frantic communication that passed between them. Her confident smirk, his desperate, pleading glance. My moment had arrived. Taking a flute of champagne from a passing waiter, I excused myself from a conversation with my cousins. "Mark, darling," I said, looping my arm through his. He flinched at my touch. "I see your special guest has arrived. It would be rude not to go over and say hello, wouldn't it?" He tried to pull back, to protest, but my grip on his arm was like steel. I propelled him forward, a gracious hostess steering her husband, a determined executioner leading the condemned. We walked across the perfectly manicured lawn, the string quartet swelling dramatically as we approached the woman who was about to have the worst day of her life. Chloe saw us coming. Her triumphant smile widened, ready to greet the wife she was about to replace. She had no idea who she was dealing with. She had no idea about Clause 26. She had no idea I was holding a detonator, and her entire world was about to be reduced to rubble. As we closed the distance, a hush seemed to fall over our immediate vicinity. Chloe's smile faltered for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes as she took in my beaming expression and my iron grip on Mark's arm. He looked like he was being marched to his own execution, his face pale and slick with a fine sheen of sweat. "Chloe, isn't it?" I said, my voice warm and welcoming. "I'm Amelia. I'm so glad you could make it." I extended my free hand. She took it hesitantly, her own feelings small and clammy in my grasp. "It's a beautiful event," she managed, her eyes darting to Mark, searching for a cue he was unable to give. "Thank you," I said. "We think so too. 5 years of marriage is a huge milestone, and I wanted to do something truly unforgettable to celebrate my wonderful, devoted husband." I punctuated the sentence by squeezing Mark's arm, and I felt him tremble. "I'm sure Mark has told you all about me," I continued, my smile never wavering. "But I feel like I know you already. Mark and I have no secrets." At this, Chloe's confidence seemed to return. A knowing smirk played on her lips. She thought this was the part where I gracefully bowed out. "He's mentioned you," she said with a dismissive little shrug. "Oh, I'm sure he has," I replied cheerfully. "He's also mentioned your lovely new apartment, the one on my credit card, and that stunning ring." I glanced down at her left hand, where the princess-cut diamond glittered in the afternoon sun. "I have to say, he has excellent taste. Of course, he should. I taught him everything he knows." Chloe's smirk vanished. The color began to drain from her face as the true nature of the situation slowly dawned on her. This wasn't a surrender. This was an ambush. "Now, if you'll excuse us," I said, my voice turning crisp and businesslike. "The ceremony is about to begin. You have a front row seat. I insisted on it." I steered a catatonic Mark away, leaving Chloe standing alone in the middle of the lawn, the eyes of several curious guests now fixed on her. The string quartet began to play the processional music. It was time. We walked to the floral archway that served as our altar. Our parents were seated in the front row, beaming with pride. I looked out at the assembled faces of our friends and family, the people who had celebrated our union 5 years ago, and in the center of the front row, in the seat of honor I had reserved, was Chloe, looking pale and sick. The officiant, a man I had hired for his sonorous voice and gravitas, began his speech about love, commitment, and the sanctity of marriage. It was all a beautiful, expensive lie. Mark stood beside me, his body rigid, his eyes locked on a fixed point in the distance. He looked like a man in a waking nightmare. When it came time for the vows, the officiant turned to me. I had prepared something special. I took a small piece of paper from the officiant. "I haven't written a vow exactly," I said, my voice ringing out clear and strong across the silent vineyard. "I've written a statement." I unfolded the paper. "Mark, 5 years ago you stood before our loved ones and promised to love, honor, and cherish me. You made a vow of fidelity, a vow you have broken repeatedly for the last 6 months with the woman sitting in the front row. Chloe, would you stand up, please?" A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Every head swiveled towards Chloe, who looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. She remained frozen in her seat. "Stand up," I repeated, my voice now cold as ice. She shakily got to her feet, looking like a cornered animal. My father started to rise from his seat, a look of confusion on his face, but my mother put a hand on his arm, her eyes fixed on me with a sudden, dawning understanding. "You see, everyone," I announced, my voice projecting to the back row. "My husband didn't just break his vows to me, he broke a legal contract. An ironclad prenuptial agreement he was too arrogant to read, specifically Clause 26, the infidelity clause." I turned to Mark, whose face had crumpled into a mask of pure despair. Clause 26 states that in the event of your infidelity proven here today in front of God and everyone by the presence of your fiancé and the $62,000 ring on her finger, which was purchased with my company card, you forfeit any and all claim to any asset acquired during our marriage. The house, the cars, the savings, the investments, everything. I let the words hang in the air. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of birds. "So no, Mark," I said, my voice dropping. "We will not be renewing our vows today. We will be ending them. This isn't a celebration. It's a severance. You are fired from this marriage, and your severance package is nothing." I turned to the audience. "I apologize to you all for bringing you here under false pretenses. Please, enjoy the champagne and the food. It's all been paid for. Think of it as a party for my independence." Then I looked directly at Chloe, whose face was streaked with tears of humiliation. "And as for you," I said, my voice laced with pity rather than malice, "I'd get that ring appraised if I were you. The man who gave it to you is officially homeless and unemployed as of right now. The locks on the house have already been changed." With that, I dropped the microphone onto the grass. I turned my back on Mark's shattered form, on Chloe's public humiliation, on the shocked faces of our friends and family. I walked, straight and tall, down the aisle I had just walked up. I didn't look back. I walked past the string quartet, which had fallen silent, past the stunned waiters holding their trays, and straight to the valet who was holding the door to my car. My car. As I slid into the driver's seat, I saw my mother and father rushing towards me. My mom had tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "I am so proud of you," she whispered, squeezing my hand through the open window. My dad just nodded, his face a mixture of anger at Mark and fierce pride in me. I started the car and pulled away from the beautiful, perfect, monumentally expensive disaster I had created. The rage that had been a cold, hard knot in my stomach for weeks finally began to dissolve, replaced by a feeling I hadn't felt in a very long time. It felt like freedom. The road stretched out before me under the perfect Napa sun, and for the first time in a long time, I had no idea where I was going. And it was wonderful.